All right, we're in Romans chapter 7 now. Again, guys, you know the rules. Jump in if you want to share something. Romans chapter 7, verse 1. Or do you not know, brothers? For I speak to men who know the law, who know the Torah. Okay, so we know the audience right now isn't for ignorant Gentiles. This is for people who have been brought up knowing the scriptures. That the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. For the woman that has a husband is bound by the law to the husband while he lives. But if the husband dies, she is discharged from the law of the husband. So then, if while the husband lives, she is joined to another man, she would be called an adulteress. But if the husband dies, she is free from the law, so that she is no adulteress, though she is joined to another man.
Mm.
I want to go to some scriptures for this. You guys feel free to help me out. One of them is Deuteronomy 24. It's a little distinct. 24 verse 1. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then it shall be, if she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some unseemly thing or some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her a certificate of divorce, put it in her hand, and send her out of the house. Now, one thing I will say, Romans chapter 7 did not mention a certificate of divorce.
No.
Why am I saying this? I will explain. I'm going to go back to Romans 7, verse 3. So then, if while the husband lives, she is joined to another man. Let me start from verse 2. For the woman that has a husband is bound by the law to the husband while he lives. But if the husband dies, she is discharged from the law of the husband. So then, if while the husband is alive, she is joined to another man, she would be called an adulteress. There's no
That's right.
topic of a certificate of divorce being spoken of here. This is a woman who is married. You guys let me know if you're seeing something different. This is a woman who's married in covenant and goes outside of her covenant to cheat on her husband while she is married to her husband. This is not in regards to what if this man gives her a certificate of divorce and sends her away. And I'm going to prove why this is not the case, because Deuteronomy 24 is going to show us what the law has to say about this. Let me go back to Deuteronomy. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then it shall be if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her a certificate of divorce, put it in her hand, and send her out of his house. When she has departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. That's proof that this is not applying to Romans chapter 7 verbatim, but I'm going to show you where it does apply. Okay, but so far, we're not dealing with a wife who is still married and gets to marry somebody else. That's forbidden. If you're married to somebody and you have not been given a certificate of divorce, you're not allowed to go out and marry another man. Okay, verse 2. But in this case, where she is allowed to marry somebody else, she's been given a certificate of divorce. When she has departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. If the latter husband, or if the second husband, hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of the house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, her former husband, who sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she is defiled. Pause. It doesn't say that she's not allowed to marry a third person. What it says is she's not allowed to marry her first husband. Okay? But you can see how the death of that husband allows provision for her to get married again to somebody else, which does apply to Romans 7. Are you guys flowing with me? I'm going to repeat that one more time. Verse 3. If the latter husband hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand and sends her out of the house, or if that husband dies, who took her to be his wife, her former husband, who sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled. So you got to read what it's saying and what it's not saying. So again, what it is saying is that she can get divorced twice. This will be her second divorce, or the second husband dies. Okay, the second one might not be a certificate of divorce. The second one might be the death of the husband. Okay, it says she can't go back to the first husband after she's been married a second time, but it doesn't say she can't get married again to somebody else. All right, I don't see that anywhere in Torah that says a woman can't get married to somebody else after her husband dies or after the second husband dies. I don't see any, unless you guys can show me something, I would, on record, I'll change my mind. But if she marries a third one, a fourth one, you know, and that husband dies, that fourth husband dies, I don't know if there's scripture that says she can't marry a fifth husband. Okay, I'm going somewhere with this, but Tobiah, I see your hand. Go ahead, Tobiah.
Hey, brother, shalom.
Shalom.
So you correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what my current view is on this, and it's been for a little while. Maybe you can see something in it, or maybe you can help me see something in it. But I believe that Messiah talked to that woman who told her that the man she currently with is not her husband, because the man that she covenanted herself to begin with is her husband until he dies. The covenant with the husband is to the death. That's why Moshe says Moshe, you know, but it wasn't, it's not, you know, covenant is to the death. I don't believe the scripture there that you're talking about where it says that she can go become another man's wife, and then if you take her back, would that not make the land greatly unclean and whatnot? He's not allowed to take her back. I don't believe that it's saying that she's allowed to go be this other man. I think it's saying she does this. There's a difference between it being allowed and she does. Just because legitimately, toward the scripture, what I see is that through numerous verses, that she's covenanted to her husband until death. There is no getting out of that by the certificate of divorce to allow her to be free to marry another. It's just that the scenario that it's given there is that she does go and lay with another man. Would he take her back? Like, example, Michal, Saul's daughter, David's first wife. Okay. He covered her. He took care of her when he got her back because Saul gave her to another man. But he never lay with her. She never bore any children to him. She was kept up as a widow to the day of her death. Same as the 10 concubines that Absalom, his son, lay with. When he lay with them and defiled all of them, David did not go into them again from that point on, but he chose to be a covering to them and kept them and looked after them until the day of their death. And I think that's the same principle that's going on here in this text. And I think we're wrong to assume, or translators or commentaries would be wrong to assume that it's saying it's okay that she go and marry another man. She can't come back and marry that man, or that she could go marry a third man, because that's the scenario that Messiah talked to that woman at the well about and told her truly that them men ain't her husband, because her first husband yet live, and she ain't ever going to be released from the covenant of that first husband until that first husband's dead. But anyway, I don't know what you think about that. I know I didn't give you exact scripture references, but I can pull them up if you need to.
No, that's a fair dialogue to have now. I like where you're going. Um, I don't know what the situation was of that woman at the well. That's one passage that has me thinking a lot and has me like assuming different scenarios, but like there's no concrete answer there. I see certificate of divorce to be a release. So I'm seeing Deuteronomy 24 different than you are. I could just say that.
Right. I used to see it that way, but
Right.
for me to be able to accept it that way, I have to have a problem with the scripture that says, truly a woman is covenanted to her husband until he dies. And that's in several places. And that would make that text be not exactly correct, because that would give an exception to that text. And that text don't note no exception to that. It says it clearly. This is how it is. That's why I learned what makes a covenant, and not just an oath or a vow, because a covenant is to the death of those that are in the covenant.
Got you. Yeah, I see the certificate of divorce being an alternate option in there that wasn't that's not being spoken of in the New Testament. But Jadiel has his hand up. So, and Nate has his hand up. So we'll let some other guys get in this. Jadiel.
Yeah, I mean the scriptures, and here's my perspective on it.
You sound a little
believe
muffled,
that there's
Jadiel. I can't hear you too well. You sound muffled.
Now, how about now?
Nah, you sound really far away for some reason.
Hello. Hello?
Yeah.
All right, go to someone else.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna go to Nate. Go ahead, brother Nate.
All right. That scripture, let's go there. That is John chapter 4, verse, let me find where that is exactly that he's talking about here. Where he talks about that you have had 5 husbands. So he said, John chapter 4:18, Messiah says here, Yahusha says, well, let's go 4:17. So the woman answered and said, I have no husband. Yahusha said to her, you have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. Now, if a woman's not allowed to have more than 5 or more than one husband, let's say, she's released from contract, then he would not have said that you've had 5 husbands. He'd have said you have had but only one husband, is what he would say. But he said clearly, you have had 5 husbands. So he doesn't specify if all of them died and she's been released to all of them. But I mean, for 5 in a row to die, I mean, that's kind of odds you need to go to Vegas on. You know what I mean? But that point aside, let's go to, well, then again, Matthew 22, I was just thinking in Matthew 22, like verse 28, it talks about each brother dying, and that would be a release of covenant. So I guess, that doesn't really prove it now that I'm understanding what you're saying there. But I see Deuteronomy chapter, that's the other scripture I was going to go into. It is Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 8. So this is Yahuwah speaking. So 3:6, and Yahuwah said to me in the days of Yoshiyahu the king, and then verse 8, so this is still Yahuwah talking here, and I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce, yet treacherous sister Yehuda did not fear, but went and committed whoring too. So, I mean, he did give her a certificate of divorce, but it doesn't necessarily say that she ever covenanted again and made necessarily another husband that I can recall. But if anyone can remember,
what passage
if it does talk about that.
What was that you just read?
Jeremiah chapter 3:8. It just talks about a certificate of divorce.
Right.
A certificate of divorce, but I can understand. I see what Brother Tobiah is saying now. If anyone can remember, if there's ever a scripture of Yisrael taking on a husband other than being adulterous with other, with other kings or Elohim, so to speak. So that's all I had to say on that.
Yeah, where I was gonna go to this, I was gonna go to Jeremiah 3 and everything. I do see that Israel, wherever they were scattered, did join covenant with other gods, other Elohim, which is equated to marriage. So they got the certificate of divorce and went on continuing to spiritually marry other Elohim, which does apply in my belief, strong belief. Deuteronomy 24 does apply to the house of Israel. Brother Jadiel's back in. All right, Jadiel, let's give it a shot. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yep.
Okay. Well, in Isaiah chapter 50, verse 2, Yahuwah says that he gives your mother the bill of divorcement, referring to Jerusalem, being the mother of them. So he does say, I give them a bill of divorcement. Now, the only reason why he allowed a bill of divorcement was for uncleanliness or some type of, I believe it's some type of wicked sexual sins. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Now, the main point that I connect with this is the fact that Messiah says that the reason why that they were given a bill of divorcement was because of the hardening of their hearts. I believe that that because of the hardness of their minds and their hearts, they couldn't understand the covenant. So he gave certain he tolerated certain things because he knew that they were not in up to par mentally to even grasp the importance of certain things. That's why he says that their hearts were hardened or their minds were hardened. So he allowed them to have a bill of divorcement. So I just apply that, and I apply that to where it says that in Moses, that when he gave them the bill of divorcement, it wasn't like an ideal situation. It wasn't a situation that Yahuwah wanted. It's just that he knew the type of individuals he was working with at that time. And in order to preserve Israel, he had to tolerate certain things, but restrict certain behaviors. So that's my perspective. I hope you guys heard me. I don't even know if you guys heard me.
Yep, we heard you perfectly loud and clear. Yeah, I think we still have hardness of heart. I don't think the hardness of heart has gone away. That's why I still think it's still like some people would say, oh, certificate of divorce can't be used anymore under the new covenant. And I don't believe that. I think we're still dealing with the hardness of heart. So I think there's still provision for the certificate of divorce.
I agree.
I wanted to go to that passage as well. If you could find that, somebody find that passage for me in Matthew where Yahusha talks about this issue.
I got it.
You got it?
It's
Emeka?
Yeah, it's
go ahead and read
Matthew's chapter. All right, so it's in Matthew's chapter 5. I'll start at verse 32. It says, "But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his woman, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to break wedlock, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced breaks wedlock."
All right, pause.
So
something I want to bring up regarding this passage that's not talked about a lot. Messiah didn't mention a certificate of divorce there. What he mentioned was sending her away. Right?
Oh, let me go back then to, because he does mention it in the previous verse. So verse 31,
okay,
it says, "It has been said, whoever shall put away his woman, let him give her a writing of divorce."
Pause. There's
Yep.
two distinct things that are being spoken of here. He says putting her away, right? And writing a bill of divorce, right? I'm going to read Deuteronomy. Just hold on real quick, Emeka. I'm going to read Deuteronomy 24 again. It says, verse 1. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then it shall be if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her a certificate of divorce, step number 1, put it in her hand, and send her out of the house. Send her out is the other step. So there's a sending away, there's a putting away of wives, but then there's also a bill of divorce part. And you can put away a wife, not that this would be wrong. And I think this is what the Messiah is talking about in that passage you're reading. And I want to see if you see it with me. people are putting away their wives without giving them a bill of divorce, and the wives are getting remarried. So without a bill of divorce, they're not allowed to remarry. And that's where the problem is. So go read the two verses together. So start from the top and let me know if you see. Let me know if
All
you
right.
see that.
It has been said, whosoever shall put away his woman, let him give her a writing of divorce. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his woman, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to break wedlock, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced breaks wedlock. So what I see in here
Go ahead.
is actually even going one step further, is that, and you mentioned it when you read that in Deuteronomy, is that number one, the cause in which you divorce her has to really be a just cause, because here it even mentions, anybody that divorces her, saving for the cause of fornication. So if you're divorcing your wife just so you can go marry somebody else that may look prettier or whatnot, whatever attraction you have to her, that's not a legit reason to divorce a woman. And so being that that's not a legit reason to divorce a woman, she should have never been divorced, number one. And then two, whoever marries her that was divorced unjustly is now breaking wedlock because she should have never been put out in the first place.
Okay. Appreciate that. We got more hands going up, so I'm not gonna hog the mic. Let me get Nazir in and then Jadiel. Nazir, you there? All right. Jadiel. Jadiel, you're muted. There you go.
Right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I see that the statement is the same thing, putting away the bill of divorcement. I see the bill of divorcement being the legalized paperwork necessary, and the putting away being the actual physical demonstration of divorce. I think that both of them are connected. I don't think that there's a separation between the two. There's a verse that Yahuwah uses in Isaiah 50. I think I mentioned it earlier. In Isaiah 50, verse 1, it says, "Thus saith Yahuwah, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement, whom I have put away? Or which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities you have sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away." So you see, he coincides the mother's divorcement with being put away as a part of the same thing. I do see the restriction, which is why he made mention of what you can do it for. And I'm not sure if you read that in Deuteronomy, where he says, if you put a woman away because of, and then it gives a specific reason, just like how the Messiah gave a specific reason. Because, again, this is not what he wants men to do. This is just what he's telling them to do in order to restrict them doing whatever they want to do, putting away wives for whatever reason they want to put away. He gives them a reason, that the only reason why they can use it, and which I believe coincides with Messiah's view of fornication or sexual disloyalty, in order to put away or divorce a wife. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you for sharing. I'm gonna kind of move it forward because there's more I wanted to talk about regarding the subject. So, Deuteronomy 24. So it goes on. After the wife has been defiled, she can't marry the first husband, right? And it says, for that would be an abomination to Yahuwah, Deuteronomy 24, verse 4. You shall not cause the land to sin, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. Jeremiah chapter 3, like Nate brought up, talks about Yahuwah writing a bill of divorce for the house of Israel. And then we're going to go back to Romans 7. Let's go back here. We read verses 1. So another thing I want to bring up is he's using a marriage. He's using those who know the Torah. He breaks Romans 7, those who know the Torah, and he's talking about marriage, right? So let's go to verse free from the law. Verse 4. Therefore, my brothers, you also were made dead to the law through the body of Messiah, that you would be joined to another, to him who was raised from the dead, that we might produce fruit to Elohim. I got to bring this up because to me it's essential to the good news, the gospel. In the Old Testament, the marriage concept was related to the father and Israel. Jeremiah chapter 3, there's a bill of divorce that takes place. And there's also prophecies where the father says, I'm the husband, Yahuwah says, I'm going to bring you back to myself. And here in Romans chapter 7, this is what we see. We see a reconciliation of the marriage covenant that was established with Yahuwah and Israel. That's what I see here. This also, to me, is a strong point showing to the oneness between the Father and the Son. I can't help it. I got to bring it out because it's right there in front of me. Feel free to share. Yeah, you know I had to, Jadiel. I had to. I know you in our fellowship today, but I'm sorry, brother. I had to. Therefore, my brothers, you also were made dead to the law. Brothers, talking about those who know the law. He's talking to Israelites. You were made dead to the law by the body of Messiah. That way, that broken covenant, that divorcement of Jeremiah chapter 3, they are broken away from that bondage from that, and they can come back to the Father in covenant marriage relationship. Feel free to share a different opinion. You can get it on record. I'll let you get it in, Jadiel, if you like, or anybody else. I don't mind. Verse 5. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's a perspective that I have on the husband that is talking about here.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you guys touched on it. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff over here. So one of the perspectives I have is that when you're free from the law, I think is connecting with Romans chapter 6. Because in Romans chapter 6, it says that we're free from sin, and that we are no longer under the law because we're free from sin. Connecting the both, looking at who we were connected to before we were connected to the Messiah. So we were connected to sin, and we cannot connect to the Messiah and connect to sin. So we have to die to sin before we can be married to Messiah. And then, well, the rest of Romans 7 kind of goes into that whole sin situation, being captive to sin as well. So Romans 6 says that we are dead to sin, and in turn, the law, we're free from that. We're free from being under the law. And I think that is just continuing that idea here, using the husband referring to sin, and we cannot be removed from sin unless we die to sin, or unless sin dies, and then we'll be able to marry another, which is HaMashiach.
I don't see the same thing, obviously. Verse 3, it says, so then, if while the husband lives, so there's a husband, she is joined to another man, she would be called an adulteress. That would be the sin. So you have a covenant between two people, a husband and a wife, and then you have terms and conditions of that covenant, and you have somebody violating those conditions, which would be transgressions, which would be sin. I don't think the husband is the transgression. I think the transgression is the transgression, and the husband is the husband. And in this context, he started off talking about, I speak to those who know the law. So I think primarily, right, salvation is for the Yahudim first. We talked about this in the beginning of our studies of Romans. To the Yahudim first, and then to the Gentiles. Yahusha said in the book of Matthew and all over the Gospels that he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, right? Don't go to the Gentiles. Don't go to the Samaritans. Go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But salvation is also for the Gentiles. So I see the husband here. I see this being brought up to connect perfectly with the marriage paradigm message from the Old Testament to New Testament.
Because I think that verse 5 and 6 will kind of show what I'm saying a little bit.
All right. We'll read 5 and 6. Nate, I see your hand is up. I'll let you get in there, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I'm trying to remember how I was going to word this here. I'm not trying to make a plug or anything like this, and this is not about. It doesn't talk about the oneness. This isn't the issue that I'm talking about. The oneness of the Father and the Son, or the lack thereof, or I understand that argument. I'm not saying one or the other, but there is a really good study on that. If anyone listening or here in the group or anyone listening, it's Lost Sheep, by 119 Ministries. They do a really good job at explaining kind of some of this aspect here that we're talking about the lost sheep of Israel, who got mixed into the nations, which is everything that we're talking about. I just wanted to say that it's really detailed on that aspect alone, and I don't believe they get into the oneness. They just talk about the lost sheep of Israel and about the marriage. They bring up Deuteronomy 24 that we're talking about. I find this a really good, study on this topic. So that's all I wanted to share.
All right, thank you. All right, verse 5. Romans 7, verse 5. For when we were in the flesh, the sinful passions which were through the law worked in our members to bring out fruit to death. Now, what this is not saying is that the law makes me sin. All right, in case people listening, this is not saying that the law makes me sin. The law shows us what sin is. It's a mirror, okay? It's a schoolmaster that leads us to Messiah. All right, verse 6. But now we have been discharged from the law, having died to that in which we were held. What were we held by? The law of sin and death, right? If we sin, we die. That's what we were held by. Having died to that in which we were held, so that we serve in newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. Another passage that people like to mess up. We don't serve in the oldness of the letter doesn't mean that we're doing away with the letters, because Yahusha said, until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle will pass from the law till all be fulfilled or all be accomplished. So heaven and earth hasn't passed away yet. But what it's saying is, having died to that in which we were held, what were we held by? Sin, right? We were held by that bondage we just read in the previous chapter, right? Giving over our members to unrighteousness, to wickedness. But now we give over our members to righteousness, works of righteousness, so that we serve in newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. Under the Torah, this covenant, this contract, this rules and regulations, that's what we deserve, sin and death, because of our sins. We were separated from Yahuwah because of our sin. But because of Yahusha HaMashiach, now we can serve in newness of spirit. And if you want to think about it, in newness of spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit lives in us. It is no longer we who live now. Messiah lives in us. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say about these two verses. Jadiel? No?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I connected these verses to the analogy that I believe the husband is referring to, because the law doesn't go anywhere. The law basically shows us that we're stuck to sin and death. Like, it reveals that sin and death is one with you, and that you cannot remove the law that reveals that. You have to remove the sin and death in order for you to be able to be fully immersed, so to speak, in other. another, which would be Hamashiach. So that's kind of what I was seeing from the very beginning. Him using the husband-wife analogy to break down your connection with sin and death, and you cannot move out of that condition unless you die first, because the law won't change, the Torah won't change. So something in your life has to change in order for you to connect with Yahuwah. And that's what Yahuwah has presented to us, the gift of his son, so that way his son can take away the sins of the world and we can be saved through his son.
All right. Anybody else? Nope. All right. I'm not seeing the law being the husband thing, Jadiel. I'm just not seeing it. But verse 6.
It is! It is!
Moving along now. Verse 7. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May it never be. However, I wouldn't have known sin except through the law. For I wouldn't have known coveting unless the law had said, you shall not covet. But sin, finding occasion through the commandment, produced in me all kinds of coveting. For apart from the law, sin is dead. I was alive apart from the law once, but when the commandment came, or verse 9 would say, I think that only applies to when you're innocent, when you're a child or something, you don't know right from wrong. But I think once you start knowing right from wrong and you start to violate what you know to be right and wrong according to your own conscience, that's when you're held accountable. I was alive apart from the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. The commandment which was for life, this I found to be for death. For sin, finding occasion through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. I'm going to say that again. For sin, what is sin? Sin is the transgression of the Torah. Sin is that's what we do. The law doesn't sin for us. We sin. We're the ones that break the terms and conditions of the covenant, of Yahuwah's instructions. For sin, finding occasion through the commandment, deceived me. Sin was able to be produced. Sin was inside of me, looking at the commandment of what to do and what not to do. And sin inside me says, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to do what that's saying to do. I don't want to do the right thing. Deceived me, and through it killed me. The combination of our sinful flesh, our own desire, our own will, and the Torah, the terms and conditions, and what happens if you break the Torah, that's a bad combination. Sinful flesh, terms and conditions of Yahuwah. It's a bad combination. Verse 12. Therefore, the law indeed is holy or set apart. The commandment set apart and righteous and good. Here goes Shaul again, bringing clarity in case like a squirrel and a rabbit, you're getting distracted and you're starting to think the law is bad and the law is no good for us. Shaul again throws in these one-liners. He throws these one-liners in there to get us back on track and let us know what he's not saying. The law is good. Did then that which is good become death to me? May it never be. May it never be. But sin, that it might be shown to be sin, was producing death in me, that which is good, that through the commandment sin might become exceedingly sinful. I paused for a moment because I had a thought, and I'm going to just share it regarding Jadiel's point. It's not the husband that died. Well, let me just say it again because it was in my mind. I had like a brain freeze moment, like, did then that which is good become death to me? That's why I don't think the law is equated to the husband, because it's the husband that dies, not the law. That's what was in my head. I was like, oh, I just stopped for a moment, like, I had like a little brain freeze. that through the commandment sin might become exceedingly sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual, there goes another one-liner, but I am fleshly, sold under sin. For I don't know that I don't know what I'm doing, for I don't practice what I desire to do, but what I hate, that I do. But if what I don't desire, if I do what I don't desire, I consent to the law that it is good. Let me see if I read that right. But if I do what I don't desire, so I desire to do the right thing, I'm looking at that law and I know it's right, I know it's good, but I don't do it, then by that, I consent, I approve of this message that that law, that thing is holy, that thing is pure, that thing is righteous. I'm the one that's messed up. So now it is no more I that do it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good thing. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh. Okay, that's not everything in me, because if you're a new creation in Messiah, behold, all things have become new. You got a new heart, you're having a renewed mind, and you got the Ruach HaKodesh in you. Okay, so not everything that is inside of us is bad. He's talking about that sinful, fleshly part of us that still exists, even though we're believers. Again, if you come across these sinless perfection people, they're going to believe that after you become a believer, that sinful flesh part is no longer inside of us. And if you sin once, it's proof that you're not born, you actually haven't been born again. Very dangerous people, very dangerous doctrine to get around. None of our forefathers embraced that. The only one that you could probably play around with is Enoch. You could probably play around with that one a little bit. He was taken up, okay? Other than that, all of our forefathers, they all sinned. They all doubted. They all messed up at some point in their walk, but they were declared men of faith, and they were declared righteous and upright men, okay? So now it is no more I that do it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good thing. For the desire is present with me, but I don't find it doing that which is good. For the good which I desire, I don't do, but the evil which I don't desire, that I practice. But if what I don't desire, that I do, it is no more I that do it, but sin which dwells in me. Again, I jump back and forth. I'm not gonna lie. I jump back and forth on whether or not I believe this is Shaul speaking of before he was a believer versus after. I jump back and forth. Jadiel, we've talked about it. We've talked with people about it before. And sometimes I jump back and forth because I still believe that even now, Paul is still human. And I think Paul still gets in his flesh sometimes. There's nothing in me that expects Paul to be, what do you call it? Immune. Yeah, perfect. Immune to sin. You got something, Jadiel? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's more like Paul is not going to negate the fact that we struggle. But I think in the previous chapters, he reveals that we are no longer slave to it.
Right.
And I think that the sequence in this chapter is before I knew the law, when I knew the law, then I knew I sinned, then the law is holy. Now I can't control myself. I need to be saved. So the whole sequence shows this is what mankind is without Messiah.
Okay.
With Messiah, you conquer. You conquer it. Without Messiah, you want to do good, and you cannot. It's impossible. And I think Romans 8 touches on the carnal mind is what makes it impossible, not the Ruach. When you have the Ruach, all things are possible.
Hallelujah.
You know?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yes, sir. It says, verse 21, I find then the law than the law, that to me, while I desire to do good, evil is present. For I delight in Elohim's law after the inward man. But I see a different law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing, we just read Psalms 1:1, Psalms chapter 1. And it's all about delighting in the law, And again, he did start off this passage talking about those who know the law. So I don't know if he's still in that theme still of those who know the law, but it would make sense that it would be those, the Yahudim or Israelites or Gentiles that have been brought up under the law without Messiah, without coming to the knowledge of Messiah. So yeah, they read Psalms 1, they memorize it, they probably recite it and sing it, and they got it all down packed, but they still struggle with the flesh. But I see a different law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity under the law of sin, which is in my members. What a wretched man I am. Who will deliver me out of the body of this death? And this is what Jadiel is saying. He has an unwavering stance that this would be the conversion experience, the born again experience. I thank Yahuwah through Yahusha Messiah, our Lord. So then, with the mind, I myself serve Yahuwah's Torah, but with the flesh, sin's law. Not that he's saying this is what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna intentionally sin. Okay, he's saying that part of me, when I sin, that's the part of me that's doing it, not the righteous part of me that has been renewed and restored and born again. Right, Jadiel? Am I correct?
Yeah, because there's no chapter. So Romans 8:1 starts out that there's no condemnation for those who are walking in the Ruach and not walking in the flesh. So he shows a distinction that now we are delivered. He says, who can deliver me from this? Because that's what you're slave to. So now I'm delivered, and now I can serve him with my mind. He just said that he was in captivity. He says he was in captivity to the law and his members. But then he says, who can deliver me? And then he says, I thank Yahuwah that now I can serve the law with my mind. And with the mind, the actions follow. Of course, he's no longer a slave to sin and death. He's no longer in captivity. He's free. He who the Son makes free is free indeed. So now Romans 8, it goes into that new way of thinking. I think he wanted to recap on what the baptism is delivering you from, what is taking it away. And then he incorporates how the law is still there, how the law is always going to be there to reveal who you are, to reveal what standing you have with Yah, and what need you have. What's the need that you have? What do you need to remove? What do you need to lay down? If you don't study the Torah, you're gonna miss out on the main aspect, which is to give and lay down everything at Yahushua's feet.
Jadiel, what would you say, or anybody here? I'm going to ask a question. Might be a little controversial, but there are some people that don't believe in the New Testament anymore. They call themselves Israelites, okay? And they believe that they can follow the Torah just like our forefathers did without the need of the Messiah. It's not really necessary. How do you respond to that regarding what we just read?
I'm going to let others go first.
Come on, jump in, guys. What you got? Nate, machine gun.
Yeah. Messiah's always been in the picture, brother. Since day one, he was there. He was there since the beginning. So anyone to try to say anything otherwise, they talk about him in Psalms chapter 1:10. They talk him in Deuteronomy chapter 18. They talk about him in Genesis chapter 1:27. They're talking about Messiah. So for anyone to try to say anything otherwise is craziness.
All right. Let me pick your brain a little bit. I'm gonna be a little critical here. What parts are you talking about the Messiah in these passages? Are you talking about the word, or are you talking about future prophecies, or?
Well, Psalms 1:10 talks about you are forever under the order of Melchizedek. in talking about that. Messiah's there. Deuteronomy chapter 18 is talking about the prophet that Yahuwah is going to send, that we have to listen to everything that comes, all the words of the Father is put in the Son's mouth or in the prophet's mouth. We have to listen to that prophet. So that would be future tense. Genesis 1:27, it says that Elohim said, let us make man in our image. The word our is plural, talking about the Father and the Son. So I'm just saying that you can't separate. I mean, I know he hadn't necessarily come in here in flesh yet, which is what John chapter 1 talks about.
Right.
The Word was made flesh. I understand that he had not come here in the flesh yet, but he was there. I mean, no one has seen the Father but the Son who was brought forth from him. So when Moshe was put in the cleft of the rock, I mean, who did he see there?
Right. So the angle you're going at is proving that there is a Messiah. There is a future Messiah that didn't appear in the flesh yet from the Old Testament. You're trying to go to scriptures to show that there's a plurality. There's some other person going on here. That's where you're going, right?
There's just trying to remember where
a question
that is,
I would ask,
Colossians.
because I'm talking about righteousness, how to be declared right with Yahuwah despite our human depravity, for lack of terms, right? Our human depravity to constantly, tend to rear off and mess up, right? How is it that our forefathers were righteous, were considered righteous people, and they didn't even see the Messiah in the flesh yet? And what do you say to a person who says, our forefathers believed the future Messiah was coming, and they were declared righteous, so I can be righteous today, even though I don't believe in the Messiah you believe in that died in 33 AD or whatever?
That's a question I'd have to ponder on. I wouldn't want to just jump the gun and say something half-cocked here. That's interesting, how to talk to someone who doesn't believe that. But righteousness comes by faith, and then faith produces works. And since everything was created through him, by him, for him, I'd have to say that faith in Hamashiach, whether he has already come the first time or was prophesied to become, like in the future from the past tense, would be the faith of the promise that through his seed, the promise would come through, and then all those who are connected to him would be heirs or co-heirs of that promise. I'd say that faith would be represented in the forefathers from that, just kind of off the hip there.
Right on. I think a good avenue to go, and not to put you on the spot, but this is just an example for all of us to be challenged to try to, maybe try to think of some strong scriptures and get better at. But I like where you're going. I think it's very important for us to prove the historicity of Messiah using the Old Testament passage. For example, like those Isaiah passages and things you were bringing up. These guys will try to say that that's regarding a physical man of Israel or something like that. And we have to actually show them how that's impossible. It contextually doesn't even fit to anybody. There's certain scriptures in the prophets that doesn't fit to a normal human person, So I think that's a good avenue to go. But Nazir, what you got? Thanks, Nate.
I would have to say I agree with Nate, and I feel like one thing we should do is take it back to the beginning in Genesis 3, 13 through 15. I'm gonna read the verses real fast. He said, "And Yahuwah Elohim said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And Yahuwah Elohim said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put I hate this word, enmity. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Just beef. Beef.
Say it again.
Beef.
Yeah, y'all would put beef between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and then it says, "It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." So, all right, he's already prophesying. You know what I'm saying? That the Satan, you know what I mean? Basically, the king of lawlessness, the father, the prince of principalities, the prince of the air, will be bruised, by a man. And like basically, he's gonna overcome and defeat sin, so that we can overcome it. And like how Nate said, like even if you think about Jacob and how he wrestled, you know what I'm saying, with him. You know what I mean? Like, who was it that he was wrestling with? You know what I mean? I think it was the spirit, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to the physical manifestation that came later.
Nice. Very good, Nazir. Jadiel. And just to respond to that, Nazir, I think some will come back at you and say, yeah, I believe that's talking about a future Messiah. I just don't believe he came yet. They might come at you that way.
Well, if that's the case, and Revelation is talking about his second coming, what is that talking about then?
They don't believe in the book of Revelation. See,
Oh
the
yeah,
people that
you
I'm
said
talking about, the people that I'm talking about deny the New Testament. So New Testament passages might not be very helpful.
Okay, I got you.
All right, Jadiel, what you got? Oop, there you go. Oh, sorry. Boom.
All right. So that's cool that you mentioned in these two aspects, like what Nate mentioned about his existence before he came, and then how does that prove that he came? So one of the things I agree, I like the idea that Nate and Nazir brought up with showing the promised seed that's constantly been promised from Genesis to Adam, even Noah, Abraham, and on. And also his pre-existence, like even Proverbs 30 verse 4 talks about talks about creation, and then says what's his name and what is his son's name, showing that him and his son were partakers of creation. Proverbs 8 verse 22 to 35. Yeah. Now there's one thing that I could think of right now, because this is a good question and just off the fly, is the prophecy in Daniel, where the prophecy of Daniel talks about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And then it talks about the rebuilding of the Jerusalem during the time of the Messiah, that the Messiah will come. And then it says that the Messiah will be cut off. It says the Messiah will be cut off and cause the sacrifices and offerings to cease or to stop in the prophecy of Daniel. So you would have to, and then the prophecy of Daniel is literally numbered all the way to the time of Messiah. So you would have to ignore the number of prophecies in the book of Daniel, the 70 weeks, the 42 weeks, the building of the walls. You would have to ignore that whole sequence, the freeing of Yehuda from Persia in order to rebuild Jerusalem before the Messiah came. And then it said that the Messiah was cut off and he caused the offerings and sacrifice to stop. So you would have to ignore that whole prophecy, which, the Talmudic Jews actually ignore the whole book of Daniel.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. That was strong, Jadiel. I'm glad I'm recording that one. That's some meat for us to dig into. That's strong right there. I want to check into the dates and all that stuff leading up to Messiah, Daniel's prophecies. Wow. That's strong right there. That's strong right there.
I got some information on that when that topic comes. I'd like to be a part of that.
You want to shoot a few things, just a few snapshots? Because this is the end of pretty much of the recording. Just a little nuggets.
I'd have to pull up my notes. I don't want to, if I'm trying to remember Daniel, let me go there in Daniel 9 real quick, because I think maybe my memory will pull me up. I think it's chapter 9:27. I think that's what it is. 9:20 something.
Pause the recording. Go.
Okay, Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and for your set-apart city to put an end to the transgression and to seal up sins and cover crookedness and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up vision and profit and to anoint the most set apart. Know then and understand, here it is, from the going forth of the command to restore. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the command to restore is talked about in Ezra, at the beginning there in Ezra, to restore and build. So I paused. So let me go back to Daniel where I was. Know then and understand from the going forth of the command to restore and build Yerushalayim until Messiah the Prince is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with streets and a trench, but in times of affliction. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off and have not, and the people of a coming prince shall destroy the city and the set apart place. And the end of it is with a flood, and waste are decreed in fighting until the end. So the timeline that they have there, it starts. It's 490 years, a day for a year is what it is. And the timeline that they have there, it lines up perfectly with. Can you just pause for a second and let me just? Yep. Here it is. No, I got it. Don't pause. Don't worry about it. I got it here. Ezra chapter 2 verse 4. I found it. Ezra chapter 2 verse 4. The Passover in 454 BC. This is just off my notes that I have here. Is that command of the rebuilding decreed? The 70 prophetic weeks is 490 years, and it matches perfectly with the 30 AD Passover of 69 prophetic weeks, which would be 483 years past Ezra 2:4, which is 454 BC. I'd have to. It'd be easier if you see it. If I'm able to do a share screen, if I had my whiteboard up and put it on a whiteboard, because there's a lot of numbers here and it's really difficult to go through it. But I got some information on that. That essentially in 30 AD, there's a break in the 69th year or the 69th week to the 70th week. There's a pause, which is kind of what it refers to in Revelation of the last week in Daniel chapter 9. The 70th week resumes, which some people try to say is the 7 years leading up into Messiah's return. 3.5 times and a half a time. Some people say it's 7 years. So long story short, there's a lot of numbers here, and so I didn't have my notes up, exactly to match everything up. But it's a day for a year that you have to do there. In 7. One last thing. Yeah, it has to do with the Yobel cycle also and the sabbatical year cycle. But that's, again, I didn't have my notes pulled up, so I'm sorry if I was a little bit scattered there.
All right, no problem. This is just some little nuggets at the end. Just give some people some ammo to look into some things. Go ahead, Jadio.
Yeah, the verse in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. Of course, all the numbers, everybody will have to kind of do their due diligence to see those numbers line up from the time that Artaxerxes commanded that they could go and rebuild the temple during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. But in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, it says that they're going to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the time of Messiah the Prince. And then he gives you another time frame of 7 weeks and then of 32 weeks to build the street and to build all those things. And then it talks about the Messiah being cut off. And then it talks about him confirming the covenant for 1 week, which is all connected. I don't think that there's a week that's separate from the rest of the time frame. I think that is just a significant time frame to show not only the death of Messiah, but also the pouring out of the Ruach on his disciples afterwards to confirm the covenant with them. So it just, the Messiah is all over that, and it gives us dates, and it gives us time frames of when certain things started and things like that. So there's no way you can ignore that Messiah was going to come at that specific time.
That's real strong, guys. I need to sharpen my skills on Daniel and that whole thing. I'm really weak at it. For me, I'm gonna share this and then I'll end the recording unless you guys want to give some feedback. But for me, where Yahuwah has me and my thing, I love the marriage paradigm. I think it's so essential to being declared righteous with Yahuwah as far as Israel goes, right? If you're talking to an Israelite who doesn't believe in the New Testament and he's stuck on the Old Testament, what's the point of trying to follow the law if you have been broken out of covenant from the Creator in the first place? It's like being married and your husband wrote you a bill of divorce, kicked you out of the house, and while you're out of the house, you're trying to fall in love with him while you're out of his house. He divorced you. He hasn't brought you back. So something has to happen so that that relationship can start to be restored. You could love them all you want, but there's still a divorce. You know, but what if I like Zechariah 12. I'm gonna go here real quick. Because a lot of them say, oh, you know what I'm saying? If the Messiah was really, if your Messiah was the true Messiah, why aren't we back in the land of Israel? And why are we still struggling? And why blah, blah, blah? And they're gonna keep going and going and going, right? With all the negative, right? But they're missing something. There's progressions, there's stages, there's steps to this marriage restoration. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. This is talking about in the last days. This is way in the future, right? Verse 9, it says, it will happen in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Yerushalayim. So obviously this hasn't happened yet. Verse 10, I will pour on David's house and on the inhabitants of Yerushalayim the spirit of grace and supplication, and they will look to me, whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and will grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for his firstborn. There's a couple things I want to say with this. First of all, there's turmoil, there's enemies of Israel all the way to this point. And at this point, they're looking back in the past and looking at Yahuwah speaking. He says, they will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they will look upon him. Then it goes to him as one mourns for his only son. So doesn't that mean if the creator of the universe died, or if somebody died, this is definitely significant to somebody dying, and there was turmoil in between that time, doesn't that mean that just because the Messiah comes doesn't mean that everything's going to be restored right away? Who's the one dying? It's not an Israelite. It's not just an Israelite, because Yahuwah says they will look upon me whom they have pierced. So it can't be some prophet, some guy, a regular Israelite. This has to be somebody that is on the same level or as close as possible to Yahuwah himself. That's kind of the avenue I go at right now. This is kind of like my avenue, and I haven't really dialogued with anybody much. I've dialogued with a few people, but I haven't really engaged in these type of non-New Testament, Old Testament only Hebrew Israelites or whatever, or Jews for that matter. So I haven't tried this avenue yet, but I definitely will take Jadiel's and you guys the information on Daniel and all that, and just add it to my repertoire. But you know, you can't follow the law now. You could try as much as you want, but there's a need for that relationship, that covenant to be restored. And that was why Yahusha died. That was the purpose he died, to restore the covenant relationship. Because other than that, we can't go back to him until the husband dies. We can't go back. We can't get back into covenant relationship. We can try to follow the terms and conditions of that covenant, but the covenant's been broken. That's the whole point. So the stage starts with restoring the covenant first, getting people into the kingdom, adding people, preaching the good news before Yahuwah decides to come and start destroying nations. So he wants to get as many nations, as many people, as many lost sheep, as many Israelites as he can now before he destroys and brings his judgment on the earth. So there's progression. People think that everything has to happen all at once. But anyway, that's the avenue I go.
Brother, before you go, I was able to kind of get some of my stuff together. Just one point I wanted to make, which is what Jadiel was saying.
Yep.
From Ezra 2:4. Now that I'm able to kind of collect, I wasn't, sometimes off the hip, I'm not such a good shot here. Ezra 2:4, which is the decree that is listed in Daniel chapter 9. Where did that start? That I started at 24 or 9:25. the decree that is given. That's 454 BC. Now, 69 weeks past that point in time matches up perfectly with 30 AD Passover, which everyone's got a different opinion on when it was that Messiah was impaled or crucified, whatever word you want to insert there, whatever year it was. But the 69-week prophecy from Ezra 2:4, 454 BC, 69 times 7 is 483 years, which brings you exactly to 30 AD, which is what it says that Messiah being cut off, who was sent and then is cut off. So the 69 weeks that is talked about in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25 and 26, for a sabbatical year, so 69 times 7, 483, brings you exactly when he was cut off on the stake or the cross. So you can't really say that which would make sense. I didn't know that they threw out Daniel, but it would make sense why they threw out the book of Daniel, because it proves Messiah already came.
Wow. That's heavy. I love it. I got to look into these numbers, man. Like I said, I'm not good at this, but I look forward to strengthening this area. That's really good. Well, good stuff, guys. Anybody else got anything else before we end the recording? We need Yahusha to be declared righteous with Yahuwah. We are all Gentile, Yahudim, Israelite. We are all sold under sin, and we all need to go through the same door. You know, that's a real main theme right now with Shaul's words so far in his letters. So that's the main point. Hope you guys enjoyed this recording. See you next time.